My parents never showed me love, especially when I got married. They refused to attend my wedding or offer any support. Their justification was that they had given all their assets to my sister, insisting she was more deserving than me. Growing up, I always knew I was the other child. My parents, Sarah and Mark, never really hid it, though maybe they weren't aware of just how blatant their favoritism was. My younger sister, Jessica, was their world. Jessica was the bright star, the prodigy they had always wanted. Meanwhile, I existed somewhere in the background, always present but never quite seen. The first time I truly realized this was in third grade. I just won the school science fair, my first real achievement. I came home that afternoon, clutching a certificate and a big grin on my face, expecting to see some hint of pride in my parents' eyes. But Mom barely looked at it before glancing at the clock and saying, "Oh, Jess has her ballet recital tonight. We can't be late." My heart sank. The certificate felt like a meaningless piece of paper in that moment, and I learned that nothing I achieved could compare to Jessica's dance routines. This pattern continued through my childhood and teenage years. No matter what I accomplished, becoming captain of the soccer team, making the honor roll, winning debate tournaments, it was always met with a lukewarm response at best. At home, conversations seemed to revolve around Jessica's latest competition or her progress in school. Even when I received a scholarship to my dream college, the reaction was muted. "We're proud of you, Alex," Dad had said, but his voice lacked enthusiasm. A few minutes later, Mom was talking about Jessica's latest dance rehearsal. When graduation day came, I wasn't surprised that my parents didn't show up. I had hoped, some small, foolish part of me had hoped, that they'd make an exception. But I got a text from Mom instead. "Congratulations, Alex. Sorry we couldn't be there. Jessica's dance finals today." That was it. No call, no follow-up. Just a text that felt like an afterthought. I felt a familiar numbness settle in. College brought a sense of relief. For the first time, I didn't have to live under Jessica's shadow. I could just be Alex, not Jessica's brother. The independence was liberating, but it also made my parents' neglect even more apparent. I'd call home occasionally, trying to share bits of my life, my grades, the new friends I'd made, the part-time job I'd landed. But the conversations were always brief and somehow circled back to Jessica. It was always, "Jessica's really stressed about her competition," or, "Did you hear? Jessica's been invited to another showcase." The ultimate blow came during my college graduation. I graduated with honors, one of the proudest moments of my life. But my parents weren't there. Not physically, and not even in spirit. I'd hoped they'd surprise me, that they'd be sitting in the audience with smiles on their faces, but the seats I'd reserved for them remained empty. After the ceremony, I got a text from Mom. It was another congratulations, but this time, it was followed by a longer message. "Jessica got into that elite dance program she's been dreaming about. We're so proud of her." The words felt like salt in the wound. A reminder that no matter what I did, Jessica's success would always matter more. I stopped trying after that. I stopped expecting their approval or acknowledgement. It was a painful realization, but it also set me free in a way. I started focusing on my own life without hoping for their validation. It hurt, but it was also a step toward acceptance. I knew that their love wasn't something I could earn, no matter how hard I tried. Years later, I met Lily and everything changed. She was a breath of fresh air, someone who genuinely cared about me and made me feel valued in a way I never had before. For the first time, I felt seen and truly loved. Lily's family was warm and welcoming, the complete opposite of mine. When I spent time with them, I realized just how different my upbringing had been. They celebrated each other's successes, no matter how small. It was a kind of love I'd never experienced but always yearned for. As Lily and I started planning our wedding, a mix of hope and fear crept back in. I wondered whether my parents would finally show some interest now that I was embarking on such a significant chapter of my life. Would they be there to support me, or would it be more of the same? Despite everything, I decided to reach out and invite them. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally show up for me. But deep down, I knew better. Things changed in my second year of college when I met Lily. It wasn't one of those dramatic love-at-first-sight moments you see in movies. It was quieter, more real. We met in a statistics class, of all places. I was struggling to make sense of the latest assignment, and she noticed my confusion. "Do you need some help?" she asked with a friendly smile. I was hesitant at first. I wasn't used to people offering help without some sort of agenda, but I accepted. We spent the next hour going over formulas and equations in a study room, and by the end of it, I realized I'd learned more in that hour than I had in weeks. But what struck me most wasn't her intelligence. It was the way she listened. She didn't just hear my words. She seemed to actually see me in a way I wasn't used to. From that day forward, Lily and I started spending more time together. We'd grab coffee between classes, explore the city on weekends, and talk about everything under the sun. I found myself sharing things I'd never told anyone about my parents, about Jessica, and about the constant feeling of being overlooked. I was half expecting Lily to dismiss it or change the subject, like most people did. But she never did. She'd nod thoughtfully, sometimes squeeze my hand and say, "That must have been really hard." For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to be perfect or achieve something grand to be worthy of love. I felt loved just for being me. Lily was there for all my small victories, the kind that never mattered to my family. She cheered me on when I landed my first internship, brought me ice cream when I failed my first major exam, and even clapped when I finally managed to cook a decent meal without setting off the fire alarm. She had a way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary, and I realized that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with someone who made me feel that way. Lily's family was a revelation too. When I first met them, I was bracing myself for the awkwardness I'd come to expect in family gatherings. But they were different, genuinely warm and welcoming. Her mom hugged me as soon as I walked in the door, and her dad immediately invited me to join him in watching a football game on TV. I felt more at home in their living room that day than I ever had in my own parents' house. There were no subtle comparisons, no dismissive comments, just genuine curiosity and interest in who I was. As Lily and I grew closer, the idea of marriage naturally came up. I'd never really thought about it before, partly because I'd never believed I'd find someone who would accept me the way she did. But with Lily, it felt right. One chilly evening, as we strolled through the park holding hands, I turned to her. "You know, I could see us doing this forever," I said, my voice a bit shaky with nerves. She looked up at me with a smile. "Me too, Alex." A few months later, I proposed. It wasn't anything grand, just the two of us at the park where we'd had that conversation, a ring hidden in my pocket, and my heart pounding in my chest. Lily's eyes lit up with surprise and joy, and when she said yes, it felt like I'd finally won something that truly mattered. Lily's family was ecstatic about the engagement, treating it like the celebration it was supposed to be. Her mom immediately started talking about wedding plans, while her dad congratulated me with a bear hug. It was overwhelming in the best way possible. I felt like I belonged, like I was finally part of a family that wanted me there. But as the wedding planning got underway, I knew I had to address the issue that had loomed over my life for years, my parents. I tried to avoid thinking about it, but it was impossible. Lily encouraged me to reach out to them, even though she knew the history. "You never know," she said softly. "Maybe they'll surprise you this time." I doubted it, but I knew I had to try. I couldn't get married without at least attempting to include my family. So, one evening I called my mom. The conversation started off awkwardly, as it always did. I told her about the engagement, trying to sound upbeat. "Lily and I are getting married," I said. "We'd love for you to be part of it." There was a pause. Then Mom said, "Well, that's nice, Alex. But you know, we've already put so much into Jessica's wedding, so we probably won't be able to help financially." I hadn't even asked for money. I just wanted them to be there, to care. "I'm not asking for money," I clarified, my voice strained. "I just want you and Dad to come. It's important to me." "We'll see," she replied vaguely. "But Jessica's been having a rough time lately. You know how it is?" I hung up, feeling the familiar pang of rejection. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, even with Lily's love to cushion the blow. Despite their lukewarm response, I tried to include them in the planning. I sent emails about dates, venues, and potential guest lists. Each one was met with either silence or a curt reply about how they were busy with Jessica's commitments. At some point, I stopped trying. I had a new family now, a real one, who actually cared about me. But I still held on to a tiny sliver of hope that, somehow, they'd show up on my wedding day. When Lily and I started planning our wedding, I knew the biggest challenge wouldn't be choosing a venue or picking a cake flavor. It would be dealing with my parents. Despite everything, I still wanted them to be a part of this milestone. Maybe it was stubborn optimism, or maybe it was that lingering, childlike hope for acceptance that refused to die. I wasn't expecting much, but I was hoping for something. I decided to invite them over for dinner one evening. I cooked, hoping to make the atmosphere warm and welcoming. I even made Jessica's favorite dessert, trying to show them that I was making an effort. As they arrived, I felt a familiar knot in my stomach. I took a deep breath and forced a smile. After some small talk that felt more forced than genuine, I finally broached the subject. "So Lily and I are deep into wedding planning now," I began, keeping my tone upbeat. "We'd love for you to be involved." Mom glanced at Dad before answering. Alex, you know we've already spent a lot on Jessica's wedding, she said flatly. We don't have much left. It was exactly what I'd feared, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. I managed to keep my voice steady. I'm not asking for money, I clarified. I just want you to be there to help pick flowers, maybe do a cake tasting. You know, be part of it. Dad sighed, leaning back in his chair. Alex, you've always been independent. We figured you'd be fine handling this on your own. That was when something inside me snapped. It wasn't anger. It was a mix of frustration, disappointment, and years of pent-up hurt bubbling to the surface. Do you even care about me at all? I blurted out, my voice louder than I'd intended. Or is everything always going to be about Jessica? Mom's face hardened, while Dad just looked weary. Alex, Jessica's always needed more support, Mom explained, as if it were obvious. You're strong. You can handle things on your own. The familiar words hit me like a cold wave. I'd heard them countless times, but now they felt unbearable. I'm not asking to be strong right now, I said, my voice breaking. I'm asking to be your son, to be included for once. Mom and Dad exchanged glances, and then Mom responded with a calmness that bordered on indifference. Alex, it's not that we don't care, she said, but Jessica has more going on right now, and we need to focus on her. I couldn't hold back anymore. This is my wedding, I said, my frustration boiling over. Is there ever going to be a time when I come first? Even just once? There was a tense silence. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice tired. Alex, you know how it is. Jessica has always needed more attention. It's not that we don't love you. The words felt hollow, as if they were rehearsed and worn out from overuse. I realized then that I was fighting a battle I would never win. No matter what I did, no matter how much I tried to bridge the gap, Jessica would always be their priority. I stood up, suddenly feeling exhausted. You know what? Forget it, I said, feeling a strange sense of finality. I don't need you to be there if you don't want to be. Lily and I have people who actually care about us. As I watched them leave that night, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Part of me ached for the relationship I'd always wanted with them, but another part felt free from the constant cycle of trying to earn their love. I wasn't sure what my wedding day would look like without them there, but I knew I wasn't going to let their absence ruin it. When I told Lily about the conversation, she hugged me tightly. I'm sorry, Alex, she said softly, but you're not alone in this. We have so many people who love and support us. Her words were comforting, but there was still a sting in knowing that my own parents wouldn't be there. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about everything that had led to this moment. Years of being the afterthought, the second choice, the one who was supposed to be strong enough to handle things alone. The next few weeks were filled with wedding plans, and I threw myself into them with more energy than I'd expected. Lily's parents were deeply involved, helping with every detail, from choosing the venue to discussing floral arrangements. It felt surreal to have people who were genuinely excited for us, who treated me like family in a way my own never had. One day, as I was finalizing the guest list, I noticed that my parents' names were still on it. I stared at them for a long time, feeling the familiar ache of disappointment. But then I made a decision. I crossed out their names and moved on. It wasn't an act of bitterness. It was an act of acceptance. I couldn't keep waiting for them to change. The weeks flew by, and before I knew it, my wedding day had arrived. I looked in the mirror, adjusting my tie, and felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement. There was still a small, hollow ache knowing that my parents wouldn't be there. But as I stepped into the ceremony hall and saw Lily waiting for me at the altar, surrounded by people who truly loved us, I knew I had made the right choice. I was marrying the woman who saw me for who I was, who loved me without conditions, and who never made me feel like I had to compete for her attention. I had a new family now, a real one. And as I stood there, hand in hand with Lily, I felt something I'd never felt with my own parents. I felt whole. Despite everything, I sent one last invitation to my parents. Maybe it was foolish, but a part of me desperately wanted to believe that they'd finally choose to show up for me. I poured my heart into a handwritten note that I slipped into their wedding invitation, explaining how much it would mean to have them there. I tried to be clear and vulnerable. This is not just another event. It's the most important day of my life. I really want you to be there. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Mom. Alex, we got your invitation, she began, her voice distant. I felt a flicker of hope. I really want you to be there, Mom, I said. I know things have been tense, but this is my wedding. It's not about the past. It's about moving forward. There was a pause before she spoke again. Well, I talked to your father, and we're just not sure we can make it, she said flatly. Jessica has a big competition that weekend, and she's been under a lot of pressure. The words hit me like a slap. It's my wedding, Mom, I said, each word measured and heavy. Don't you want to be there for me? Her response was maddeningly calm, as if she were discussing weekend plans. Alex, we know how strong you are. You've always managed just fine on your own. I could feel my heart breaking all over again. You don't even want to try? I asked, my voice cracking. It's not that we don't want to, she insisted, but her tone was more defensive than compassionate. It's just that Jessica needs us more right now. I couldn't believe it. You really think she needs you more than I do? On my wedding day? I asked, disbelief evident in my voice. Dad's voice suddenly came on the line, more resigned than apologetic. Son, you've always been independent. We raised you to be self-sufficient. You'll be fine. And that was it, the final straw. I'd spent my whole life being fine because I'd had no choice. But this wasn't about being fine. It was about feeling loved and supported. I realized right there in that moment that they weren't going to change. The love I'd always hoped for wasn't coming, and the constant pursuit of their approval had only brought me pain. Okay, I said quietly, feeling an eerie calm wash over me. I understand, but I didn't really understand. I would never understand how my own parents could choose Jessica's competition over my wedding. It was a choice I'd always feared they'd make, but facing the reality of it was gut-wrenching. I hung up the phone, feeling more alone than I had in years. It wasn't just the sting of rejection. It was the realization that I had wasted years hoping for a change that would never come. I'd always told myself that if they missed this one, it would be my breaking point. Now, that breaking point had come, and it was more definitive than I'd imagined. I felt numb as I told Lily about the conversation. Her face crumpled with sympathy as she pulled me into a tight hug. I'm so sorry, Alex, she whispered. You deserve better. I nodded, feeling tears well up, but refusing to let them fall. I know, I managed to say, my voice hollow. I thought maybe this time would be different. Lily's eyes were full of love and understanding, but also a sadness that came from witnessing my pain. You don't have to fight for their love anymore, she said firmly. You have me. You have us. You're not alone. Her words were the reassurance I needed, but they couldn't fully numb the pain. I realized that I would have to come to terms with my parents' decision in my own time. In the following weeks, I tried to focus on the excitement of the wedding. Lily's family was a constant source of support. They were fully invested, from Lily's mom meticulously planning the seating chart to her dad researching the best caterers in town. It was a stark contrast to what I was used to, and it was bittersweet. The warmth of their involvement only highlighted the coldness of my own family's absence. The wedding day arrived, and I was a mess of nerves and emotion. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie for what felt like the 100th time, I couldn't help but feel a lingering emptiness. I was getting married without my parents there to witness it. But I pushed the thought aside. I couldn't let it ruin my day. When I walked down the aisle and saw Lily waiting for me, her face radiant with love and joy, I felt a surge of overwhelming happiness. She was my family now, and so were the people in that room who had chosen to be there. During the reception, Lily's father took the mic to give a toast. His words were simple but heartfelt. Alex, you're not just marrying into our family. You're part of it. We love you, and we're proud of you. It was the first time in my life that I'd heard someone say those words directly to me and mean them. Tears filled my eyes, and for once, I didn't try to hold them back. I was surrounded by people who truly loved me for who I was, and in that moment, I felt a sense of peace I'd never experienced before. After the wedding, I decided to fully let go of the hope that my parents would ever change. I stopped trying to bridge the gap and started focusing on the people who chose me, who loved me unconditionally. It was a painful acceptance, but it was also freeing. I didn't need to keep fighting for a place in a family that had never really wanted me. I had a new family now, one that welcomed me with open arms, one that loved me without conditions. And as I stood beside Lily, holding her hand, I knew I had finally found what I'd been searching for all along, a place where I truly belonged. The morning of my wedding was a mix of excitement and lingering sadness. I tried to focus on the joy of marrying Lily, but there was no denying the emptiness of knowing that not a single member of my family would be there. I had hoped, even in those last days, for a miracle, that my parents would change their minds, show up unannounced, and finally choose me for once. But as I adjusted my tie in front of the mirror that morning, I knew it wasn't going to happen. Still, I was determined to make this day about joy and new beginnings, not about the people who had chosen not to be there. I couldn't let their absence overshadow what should be the happiest day of my life. Lily was radiant as always. The moment I saw her in her wedding dress, all my anxieties faded into the background. Her smile, warm and genuine, was enough to remind me why we were here. This wasn't just a ceremony. It was the start of a life I'd been longing for, one built on love, acceptance, and real, unconditional support. As guests arrived, Lily's family buzzed around, making sure everything was perfect. Her mom fussed over the floral arrangements, her dad joked with the guests, and her siblings helped set up the final details. It felt surreal to be surrounded by so much love and excitement. Love that I hadn't earned through accomplishments or struggle, but simply by being myself. Just before the ceremony, Lily's father pulled me aside. His face was serious but kind. "Alex," he began, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I want you to know that you're not just marrying Lily. You're becoming part of our family. And we're proud to have you." The words struck a chord deep within me, bringing a lump to my throat. I hadn't expected to feel so emotional. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice a bit choked. "It means more than you know." He gave me a firm hug, a rare gesture of affection that felt genuine. It was a hug filled with acceptance, and it was something I'd craved for years without ever realizing it. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere, like I was part of a family that genuinely wanted me there. As the ceremony began, I stood at the altar waiting for Lily, trying to focus on the moment. The music started, and when Lily appeared at the end of the aisle, I felt a rush of emotions. Happiness, gratitude, and a sense of peace I hadn't experienced before. She looked breathtaking, but it was more than that. Her eyes, filled with love and warmth, locked onto mine, and in that moment, everything felt right. We exchanged vows that we had written ourselves. Lily's were heartfelt and sincere, filled with promises of love, laughter, and a partnership built on mutual respect. I could barely hold it together as I recited mine. I promised to love her without conditions, to be her partner in everything, and to always make her feel seen and valued. I meant every word. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," the room erupted in applause as I kissed Lily, sealing the start of our new life together. It was a surreal moment, one that was filled with joy, love, and the overwhelming sense of acceptance that I had longed for my entire life. The reception was a celebration like no other. Lily's family showered us with love and enthusiasm, making me feel like I'd been part of their lives for years. Her mom pulled me aside at one point and said, "You're one of us now, Alex. We're so happy to have you." Even her younger brother, who had initially been wary of me, clapped me on the back and said, "You're good for Lily. We're glad she found you." The toasts were filled with stories of love, laughter, and heartfelt wishes for our future. Lily's best friend shared anecdotes about our relationship, joking about how I'd once tried to impress Lily by cooking dinner and had nearly set the kitchen on fire. The room erupted in laughter, and I laughed too, realizing that this was exactly what I'd always wanted, a group of people who truly cared, who accepted me as part of their family. But the most emotional moment came when Lily's father stood up to give his toast. He started with a story about Lily's childhood, but soon his voice grew serious. "Alex," he said, looking directly at me, "you've shown us all what love truly looks like. You've faced challenges, and you've come through them with strength and grace. We're not just proud of you today, we're proud of you every day." His words brought tears to my eyes, and I wasn't the only one. Lily's mom wiped away a tear, and even Lily reached for my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. It was the affirmation I'd never received from my own parents, but here it was raw, real, and fully deserved. As the night wound down, Lily and I shared a slow dance, surrounded by the people who had shown up for us, who had chosen to be part of our journey. I leaned in close and whispered, "Thank you for making me feel like I belong." Lily's eyes were filled with love as she replied, "You always belonged, Alex. You just needed the right people to see it." And she was right. In that moment, surrounded by genuine love and acceptance, I finally let go of the years of rejection and pain. My parents' absence no longer felt like a crushing weight. It was just a fact of my past, not my future. I had found a family, a home, and a love that was worth more than all the approval I had once desperately sought. I was no longer the invisible son. I was Alex, husband, friend, and part of a family that had chosen to love me for who I was. And that was more than enough. After the wedding, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, joy, and a strange sense of grief. Letting go of my parents was liberating, but it also left an unexpected emptiness. I'd spent so many years trying to be part of a family that had never fully embraced me. And now that I'd made the decision to stop trying, I was finally free, but also a little lost. Lily was my constant source of strength. She encouraged me to see that letting go wasn't failure. It was self-preservation. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is walk away, she told me one night as we sat on our couch, sipping wine. But it's still family, I said, feeling the familiar weight in my chest. I know, she replied gently. But family doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your peace. With Lily's support, I began to focus more on the people who genuinely cared about me. My friends, Lily's family, and even a few distant relatives who reached out after the wedding to congratulate us. It was a slow but steady process of building a new circle of support, one that wasn't dependent on trying to win love or approval. I threw myself into work and into my relationship with Lily. We planned our first big vacation as a married couple, a trip to Italy that we'd always talked about. The anticipation of exploring Rome's cobblestone streets and Venice's winding canals brought a sense of excitement I hadn't felt in years. It felt good to look forward to something, to focus on creating new memories rather than dwelling on old wounds. One evening, as Lily and I were enjoying a quiet dinner at home, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. "Hello, Alex," came a hesitant voice from the other end. I recognized it immediately. It was Jessica. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions: surprise, anger, confusion. "Jessica?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, it's me," she replied, her tone uncertain. "I know it's been a while, but I need to talk to you." I was stunned. Jessica and I hadn't spoken since the failed attempt to get our parents to attend the wedding. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear what she had to say, but something in her voice stopped me from hanging up. "Okay," I said cautiously. "What's this about?" There was a pause on her end, as if she were gathering the courage to speak. "I know things have been bad between us," she began. "But I need you to understand that I never wanted it to be this way." I felt a surge of frustration. "Jessica, I tried for years to be part of the family, but you know as well as I do that Mom and Dad always made it clear who came first." "I know," she said quietly. "I'm not here to defend them. I'm here because, well, things aren't as perfect as they seem." That caught me off guard. Jessica was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who got everything. What could possibly be wrong in her world? "Alex, I'm not okay," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "Everything they push me to do, dance competitions, elite programs, it's always been their dream, not mine. I'm exhausted. I can't keep up with it anymore." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. This was the last thing I'd expected to hear from her. I'd always seen Jessica as the privileged one, the one who got all the love and support I never did. But now, hearing her pain, I realized that maybe she was trapped too, just in a different way. "I never thought you felt that way," I said, my tone softer now. "Of course you didn't," she replied, sounding defeated. "I never showed it. I thought if I kept doing what they wanted, they'd eventually be satisfied. But it's never enough. It's like living in a cage, Alex." Her words hit me hard. It was strange to think that we'd both been victims of our parents' expectations, just in different ways. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I realized how wrong it was to let things get this far," she said. "You were getting married, and I should have stood up for you. I should have been there, Alex." I felt a mix of anger and sympathy. "You weren't there, Jess," I said bluntly. "And it hurt. A lot." "I know," she whispered. "And I'm sorry. I want to try to make things right. If that's even possible." Part of me wanted to shut her out, to tell her it was too late. But another part of me, a part that still longed for family, felt a small spark of hope. I wasn't sure if it was genuine or foolish, but I couldn't deny that Jessica's vulnerability touched something in me. "Maybe we could start over," I said finally, my voice steady but cautious. "But it's going to take time, Jess. A lot of time." "I understand," she replied. I didn't want to lose you completely." After the call, I sat there for a long time, processing what had just happened. Lily noticed the look on my face. "Is everything okay?" she asked, concerned. "It was Jessica," I said, still trying to make sense of it all. "She wants to try to make things right." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "And how do you feel about that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I never thought she'd reach out like this. But maybe it's a chance for something different." Lily squeezed my hand. "Just take it one step at a time. You don't owe anyone more than you're ready to give." Her words resonated deeply. I wasn't sure what lay ahead with Jessica, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation or a guarantee that things would be fixed, but it was a start, a chance to heal some of the wounds that had been left open for too long. As I looked across the table at Lily, I felt a sense of clarity. I had built a life with people who chose me, who loved me without conditions. And if there was a chance to redefine my relationship with Jessica, I was willing to try. Not because I needed to chase old approval, but because I was finally strong enough to choose the kind of relationships I wanted to nurture. Maybe moving forward didn't have to mean leaving everything behind. Maybe it meant making peace with the past and finding new ways to connect. Either way, I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer the boy desperately seeking validation. I was Alex, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. The day after our unexpected phone call, Jessica and I met at a quiet cafe. I arrived early, unsure of what to expect. My emotions were all over the place. Part of me was defensive, while another part was curious. When Jessica walked in, she looked different. The confident, polished version of my sister was gone. Instead, she seemed almost vulnerable, like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for too long. "Hey, Alex," she greeted me, her voice subdued. "Hey," I replied, unsure of where to start. I gestured to the seat across from me. "Have a seat." We sat in awkward silence for a moment before Jessica took a deep breath and spoke. "I know you think Mom and Dad have always favored me," she began, her voice shaky. "And you're right, but there's a lot you don't know." I leaned back, crossing my arms defensively. "I'm listening." Jessica looked down at her hands, fidgeting nervously. It wasn't just about getting everything I wanted. It was about making sure I never disappointed them. "The pressure to be perfect has been overwhelming, Alex. I wasn't expecting this. I had always seen Jessica as the golden child, the one who got everything I'd been denied: love, attention, approval. But hearing her talk about the weight of our parents' expectations changed things. It added a layer of complexity to a story I thought I'd understood. "They didn't give me everything because they loved me more," she continued, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and pain. "They did it because they saw me as an investment, a project they could mold into their version of success. It was never about love. It was about control." The word control lingered in the air, and for the first time, I felt a pang of empathy for Jessica. I had always envied her position, but I had never considered what it was like from her side. I had imagined her life as one of constant praise and unconditional support, but her reality was different. She had been trapped by the very love I had been denied. "You know," I said slowly, still processing, "I never thought of it that way. I always saw you as the lucky one. I thought you had it all." Jessica shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "I wasn't lucky, Alex. I was just stuck in a different kind of prison. They measure my worth by my achievements, not by who I really was." Her words hit me hard. I'd spent years feeling rejected, unloved, and unseen, and I had assumed Jessica's life was the opposite, filled with affection and support. But now, I realized that she had been just as hurt as I had been, albeit in a different way. She had been suffocated by expectations, while I had been starved for validation. "I know I wasn't there for you," Jessica continued, her voice breaking, "especially during your wedding. I let them dictate my decisions because I was afraid of disappointing them. And I'm so sorry, Alex. I should have stood up for you." I felt a mix of emotions: anger at the years lost, sadness for the sister I hadn't really known, and a strange sense of relief that she was finally acknowledging the truth. "I never thought I'd hear you say that," I admitted, my voice softening. "But I appreciate it." Jessica looked up, her eyes filled with a raw sincerity I'd never seen before. "I want to fix things between us," she said. "I know I can't change the past, but I want to try to be a better sister from now on." I nodded, still cautious, but open to the possibility of something new. "I don't know what that looks like, Jess," I said honestly, "but I'm willing to try." There was a moment of silence as we both processed the weight of what had just been said. It wasn't the resolution I had imagined. It wasn't some grand, tearful reconciliation, but it was a start. For the first time, I saw Jessica not as my rival, but as someone who had also suffered under the same roof, just in a different way. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "I've always envied you. But now I realize we were both just trying to survive." Jessica nodded, a sad smile crossing her face. "I know, and I'm sorry it took me this long to understand that." We talked for a while longer, sharing stories of our childhood with a new perspective. We laughed at memories that once stung, like the time I won a school award and they left early to get Jessica to a dance practice. We both knew the pain behind the laughter, but acknowledging it together felt strangely healing. "I wish things had been different," Jessica said quietly as we stood to leave. "Me too," I replied. "But maybe we can make them better from here." As we hugged awkwardly, I felt a flicker of something that had been absent between us for years. Hope. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was the first step towards something that could be real. We weren't going to magically fix decades of hurt in one conversation, but we were finally talking about it. That night, I told Lily about the meeting. She listened carefully, her face a mix of surprise and encouragement. "I'm proud of you," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "It takes a lot to let someone back in after so much hurt. I don't know if it'll work," I admitted, "but I think I owe it to both of us to try." Lily nodded. "Whatever happens, you're stronger now, Alex. And you're not alone." And she was right. I was no longer the boy desperately seeking love and validation from people who couldn't give it. I had built a new life, one that was filled with people who genuinely cared. But maybe, just maybe, there was room to reclaim some of what had been lost along the way. It wasn't the ending I'd envisioned, but it was a beginning I was finally ready to embrace. After my conversation with Jessica, a shift began inside me. It wasn't a complete transformation. Old wounds don't heal overnight, but it was a start. I found myself letting go of some of the bitterness that had weighed me down for so long. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was an acceptance of the past and a determination not to let it dictate my future. With Lily by my side, everything felt more possible. She was my anchor, the one who had seen me at my lowest and had loved me through it. Her steady presence reminded me that I wasn't defined by the family that had neglected me. I was defined by the family I was creating, a family built on love, support, and the kind of acceptance I had always longed for. Lily and I began settling into the rhythms of married life. We spent lazy Sunday mornings in bed, talking about our plans for the week ahead. We went on spontaneous weekend trips, explored new restaurants, and had the kind of silly, everyday adventures that made life feel full. It was the simple joy of being loved and chosen every day, and it was more healing than I could have imagined. Lily's family continued to embrace me wholeheartedly. Her parents became more than just in-laws. They were the parents I had always hoped to have. I often found myself lingering at their house after Sunday dinners, chatting with Lily's mom about the garden she was so proud of, or watching sports with her dad. There was never any pressure to be anything other than myself, and that freedom was still a novelty I was getting used to. Jessica was reaching out more often, too. It was tentative at first, a text here and there, a comment on social media, but gradually it became more frequent. We met for coffee occasionally, and our conversations felt different from before. They were less guarded, more real. We talked about our current lives, our childhoods, and the ways we were both trying to move forward. It wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. One day, Jessica called me unexpectedly. "Hey, I know this is last minute," she said, sounding nervous, "but I have a small dance recital this weekend, and I'd really like it if you could come." I paused, feeling a strange mix of emotions. It was a simple request, but it carried a lot of weight. Jessica had never asked me to be part of her life like this before. "I'll be there," I said, surprising even myself with how quickly the words came. When I arrived at the recital, I saw Jessica standing backstage, looking anxious. She spotted me in the crowd and managed a small, grateful smile. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel, but as I watched her perform, I felt a surprising sense of pride. Not because she was perfect or because she excelled, though she was talented, but because she was my sister, and for once I was there for her in a way I'd never been before. After the performance, Jessica came over flushed and a bit out of breath. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice earnest. "It really means a lot." I nodded, feeling a sincerity I hadn't known I was capable of. "Of course, Jess. I'm glad I came." It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it was a meaningful moment, a small piece of the new life I was trying to build. One where I could be both strong and forgiving. The more I focused on the present, the less the pain of the past held sway over me. I wasn't trying to prove anything to my parents anymore. I wasn't seeking validation from people who had never truly seen me. I was investing into relationships that mattered, the ones that added joy and meaning to my life. Lily and I began talking about the next steps in our journey, starting a family, buying a house, and building a future that was grounded in love and mutual support. The idea of being a father was both thrilling and daunting. I thought back to my own childhood and vowed to be different, to be present and engaged in a way my parents never were. One evening, as we were having dinner on our small balcony, watching the sun set, Lily turned to me with a soft smile. "You seem lighter these days," she said. "I think I am," I admitted, surprising even myself. "It's like I'm finally letting go of all that weight I've been carrying for years." Lily reached across the table and took my hand. You deserve to feel free, Alex. You always did. Her words were simple, but they held a truth that had taken me years to accept. I did deserve to feel free, to be happy, to be loved, and to create the kind of life I had always wanted. As the months passed, I found myself reflecting less on what had been missing in my past and more on what was present in my life now. The pain and the rejection were still there, but they no longer defined me. Instead, I was defined by the love I had chosen, the relationships I had nurtured, and the peace I had fought so hard to achieve. One weekend, as Lily and I were packing for a spontaneous road trip, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror. I looked different, happier, more at ease. It wasn't just the physical changes. It was the sense of contentment that came from within. I felt like a man who had finally found his place in the world, not because of what he had achieved or proven, but because of the people who had chosen to love him. I wasn't chasing the past anymore. I was building a new life, one filled with love, laughter, and the kind of acceptance I had once thought was impossible. And as I looked at Lily, smiling at me from across the room, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. For the first time in my life, I felt complete, and that was more than enough.